Thank you for joining me today. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe wherever you are. What I'm about to share is one of those stories that never quite leaves you. It's quiet, it's personal, and it's something I've carried with me my whole life. I never told this to Anya, my wife, not my kids, not even close friends. It's about my grandfather, a quiet man who lived deep in the forests near Willow Creek, California. And it's about something or someone that used to sit with him. Not a neighbor, not a drifter. Something older, wilder, and deeply aware. Some bonds don't need words. This is one of those stories. When I was a boy, I spent my summers with my grandfather in a small wooden cabin near Willow Creek, California. His place sat deep in the redwoods, where the trees grew tall and the air smelled like pine and earth. It was quiet country, no phones, no television, just the sound of birds, wind, and the occasional rustle in the woods. Grandpa didn't talk much. He was a quiet man with a strong back, rough hands, and a face weathered by years of hard living. He didn't smile often, but he wasn't unkind. He just didn't waste words. What he did have, he poured into the land. He knew the trees, the animals, the signs in the dirt. He didn't need much, just his cabin, his garden, and the woods around him. Every evening after supper, Grandpa would sit on the old bench outside the cabin. He'd light his pipe, take a slow draw, and stare out into the trees. Sometimes he'd nod like he was listening to something. I used to wonder what he heard. He never said. He just sat there, still as stone, eyes locked on the forest, like he was waiting for something, or someone. Those summer days with Grandpa were simple but full. We'd wake early, eat a quiet breakfast, usually oatmeal or fried eggs, then head out. Sometimes we fished the Klamath River, just a short walk from the cabin. Other days, we cut firewood or picked berries along the edge of the trees. Grandpa taught me how to whittle, and I'd sit for hours carving little animals, while he worked nearby, always alert, always watching. The cabin was old but sturdy, nestled between towering redwoods. It sat in the heart of Bigfoot country, though I didn't think much of it back then. The neighbors were miles away, and the forest was thick, dark, and quiet, sometimes too quiet, but I never felt afraid with Grandpa around. Every evening, like clockwork, Grandpa would sit on that old bench out front. He'd light his pipe, lean back, and stare into the tree line. Never spoke, just watched. He wasn't just looking at the wood, he was watching for something. I asked him once what he was waiting for. He just said, "You'll understand one day." Then he went back to watching the trees like he was waiting for a friend to come walking out of them. I was about 10 years old when it happened. I woke up in the middle of the night, needing to use the outhouse. The cabin was dark, the kind of deep black you only get way out in the woods. I grabbed the old flashlight from the nightstand and stepped outside, trying not to make a sound. As I rounded the corner toward the outhouse, I saw Grandpa sitting on the porch. Nothing unusual, he often sat there late, even in the cold. But this time, he wasn't alone. There was something beside him, a shape huge, still, and dark as the trees. It sat like a man, but it was too big, too broad. At first, I thought it was a shadow or maybe a trick of the light. But then it moved. The figure shifted slightly, rising slowly to its full height. It towered over Grandpa, then took one silent step off the porch and vanished into the trees without a sound. Grandpa didn't flinch, didn't even look at it. He just kept staring into the forest, pipe glowing faint in the dark. I stood there frozen, too scared to speak, too shocked to forget what I saw. The next morning, I couldn't keep it to myself. Over breakfast, I asked Grandpa about the shadow on the porch. I tried to sound casual, but my voice shook a little. He didn't look up from his coffee. After a long pause, he said, "Some things live out here that don't bother nobody, long as we show respect." That was all he said. No explanation, no questions, just that. His voice was calm, steady, not scared, not surprised, like he'd seen it all before. I waited for more, but he just kept eating, like the matter was settled. I remember thinking how strange that was. If I'd seen something like that up close, I'd be shaken, but not Grandpa. He didn't treat it like a monster or a ghost. He treated it like an old neighbor, someone he'd known for years. That day, I realized the woods held more than just deer and bears. Grandpa wasn't just watching the trees all those evenings she was waiting, maybe even keeping watch. He never brought it up again, and I didn't press him. But I never forgot what he said, and I never stopped wondering what else he knew about what lived in those redwoods. As I got older, Grandpa started teaching me what he called the quiet rules of the woods. These weren't your usual safety tips. He never wrote them down, and he never explained too much. He just expected me to listen and follow them. "Never shout out here," he said once, as we hiked toward the river. "Voices carry too far, and you don't know who's listening." Another rule: don't go past the old broken pine up on the ridge. "That's their side," he'd say. "We don't go where we're not invited." But the one that stuck with me most was the offering rule. Every few days, we'd leave something: fish guts from our catch, a few apples, sometimes bits of jerky on a flat stump near the woodline. I once asked if it was to keep raccoons or bears away from the cabin. He shook his head. "They're not for animals." He never said who they were for, but I knew. I remembered that shadow, and the way he always stared into the trees, like they were watching back. Grandpa believed in respecting the forest, not just the land, but the things that lived in it, seen and unseen, and I did too. I was about 15 the summer it happened. I'd gone out alone, farther than I should have, near the edge of the Trinity Forest. The air was thick and still, the kind of quiet that makes you stop and listen. That's when I heard its soft footfalls behind me. Not heavy or crashing, just steady, careful steps. I froze. Whatever it wasn't trying to scare me. It was just there. I turned and saw tracks in the dirt. Huge prints, much larger than a man's. Deep, spaced wide apart. Something heavy had walked there, just minutes before. My heart pounded, but I couldn't look away. Then I saw it. Standing maybe 30 yards off, half hidden behind a tree, was a massive figure. It had reddish-brown hair from head to toe, long arms, broad chest, and eyes that looked straight into mine. Not angry, not afraid, just watching. For a few long seconds, we stared at each other. Then, without a sound, it stepped back into the trees and disappeared. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just stood there, shaken but somehow calm. Grandpa was right, some things live out there, and if you respect them, they'll respect you back. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. I told Grandpa, expecting him to react. He didn't, just nodded once, then went about lighting the fire pit out by the edge of the yard. As dusk settled in, I stayed inside, watching through the window. Grandpa sat in his usual spot, but not on the porch this time. He was by the fire, facing the woods. The light flickered off his face, and behind him, the trees stood tall and silent. Then it came. The creature stepped quietly from the woods and sat down just beyond the fire's edge. Not close, but near enough. Big as ever, covered in that reddish-brown hair. It didn't look at the cabin. Didn't make a sound. Just sat. The two of them stayed like that for a long time. Neither spoke. Neither moved much. Just sitting there, together, like men who'd known each other a lifetime and didn't need words anymore. I didn't feel fear. Not anymore. What I felt was something deeper, like I was witnessing something sacred, something old. That moment changed me. It wasn't about proof or belief. It was about understanding. Some connections don't need explaining. They just are. That night, after the fire died down and the creature had gone back into the woods, Grandpa came inside and sat at the table. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then, without looking at me, he spoke. "Suppose it's time you knew." He told me about a hunting trip he took years ago, before I was born, up near Hoopa Valley. Said he slipped on wet moss and tumbled down a steep ravine, broke 2 ribs and couldn't climb out. He laid there for hours, thinking he might not make it. Then, just before nightfall, he saw movement in the trees. A tall figure covered in dark hair, walking on 2 legs approached. Grandpa reached for his rifle, but something in its eyes made him stop. There was no threat, no fear. It just sat there, Grandpa said, right across from me. Didn't come closer, didn't leave either. Stayed there all night. By morning, he was strong enough to crawl out. When he looked back, the creature was gone. "It knew I wasn't a threat," he said quietly, "and I figured maybe it wasn't one either." That was the night I finally understood. Respect goes both ways in the forest. That last summer, Grandpa had grown slow. He walked with a cane, moved carefully, and spent most of his days in his old rocking chair by the porch. He didn't speak much anymore, just nodded or gave a quiet grunt when I talked to him. But he wasn't sad. He seemed peaceful, like a man who had made peace with the world and whatever waited beyond it. The creature came more often now, always at dusk, always quiet. It never came close to the cabin, just stood or sat near the edge of the yard, half in shadow. Grandpa would nod when it appeared, like greeting an old friend. No words, just quiet understanding. One night, I decided to join them. I brought out a stool and sat beside Grandpa near the fire pit. The creature came soon after, settling across from us, just past the light. We sat there for what felt like hours, saying nothing, just watching the stars come out one by one. 3 figures, one old, one young, one not quite either, sharing a moment in the stillness. No fear, no questions, just peace. It was the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Grandpa passed quietly in his sleep later that fall. No hospital, no fuss. Just never woke up one morning, still holding that old pipe in his hand, his face calm like he'd just drifted off watching the trees. It didn't hit me right away. He'd always been part of that cabin, part of the land like the redwoods themselves. I stayed a few extra days, packing up his things and walking the trails we used to take together. Come spring, I brought his ashes back to the Klamath River Trail, just like he would have wanted. It was quiet that day, warm and still. I hiked out to a spot we used to fish from his favorite bend in the river and stood there for a long time before I opened the urn. As I scattered the ashes into the water, something caught my eye across the river. There, just beyond the trees, stood the creature, still as ever, watching. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there while the ashes drifted downstream. Then, like always, it turned and slipped back into the forest. I didn't cry, I just smiled. Grandpa wasn't alone out here. He never had been. And now, neither was I. I never told anyone. No photos, no proof. Not even a story until now. Some things aren't meant to be shared with just anyone. They belong to the woods, to the quiet, to men like Grandpa who understood what respect really meant. Every summer since, I've returned to the cabin. I keep it up, patch the roof, sweep the porch. It's old, but it still stands strong just like he did. I fish the river, chop wood, and sit by the same fire pit where the 3 of us once watched the stars. And I still leave apples on that old stump near the woodline, always fresh, always with care. It's not a ritual, it's a promise, a way of saying, I remember. Some evenings, as the sun drops behind the trees, I hear it, soft footsteps, slow and measured. I never turn to look. I don't need to. I know it's there, just beyond the trees, watching, maybe waiting, like before. I don't go looking for answers anymore. I've learned what Grandpa taught me, that some truths don't need to be explained to be real. You just carry them, quiet and steady, like an old man's word in the deep woods. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't have grasped as a boy. Grandpa and that creature Bigfoot, or whatever name people give it, they shared something most folks never find. Not excitement, not fear, just quiet respect. A bond built not on conversation, but on presence, on showing up, again and again, without asking anything in return. They were two beings from different worlds own man, one legend connected by something deeper than words. Neither tried to change the other. They simply accepted each other for who they were. And in that, they found peace. I used to wonder what they talked about, if anything. Now I know better. They didn't need words. Just silence, trust, and time. And maybe that's all some friendships ever require. In a world so full of noise, that kind of connection feels like a miracle. But out there, in the stillness of the redwoods, it just felt natural. Grandpa is gone now, and the creature remains a shadow in the trees. But I carry their friendship with mine the way I sit quietly by the fire, in the way I leave apples on the stump, and in the way I listen when the forest speaks, without saying a word.